baseball is in full swing, the Nintendo Entertainment System is packed to the rafters with baseball games. Let's rank and review every baseball game released in North America for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Baseball Nintendo. Now, we're looking at single player, as in versus the computer. I'm sure fun could be mined from even the worst of these with a friend. I used to play a lot of trash as a kid, and will mention my experiences as we comb through these titles, but nostalgia won't be considered. This is strictly my experience versus computer. Man versus machine. I'm also not considering official rules or licenses. Yes, it's nice seeing your team represented, especially for me as an Expos fan. These games can be a fun time capsule. This rank and review has been in the works for well over a year. Revisiting all of these 8-bit baseball titles has been a real thrill. Oddly, there aren't a lot of videos or articles covering this entire lot, and the ones that do exist seem to be more interested in apathetically reciting facts found on websites like Wikipedia. Not here. I'm an NES fan who just happens to also love baseball. As a result, you're gonna get some very real opinions all up in your face. So sit back with a pack of peanuts, a foot long, an overpriced draft beer, and or maybe a pretzel, because it's time to play ball. Okay, so right off the bat, I'm starting with the first of many baseball puns, as well as a Famicom title that I have little to no experience with. It's basically here at the bottom because I found it a struggle to play. It's ambitious to the point of being broken. For my money, another title deserves this spot, but at least that one's relatively functional. Here in Super Real Baseball 88, it's necessary to tap a button to catch the ball. Cool, what an interesting idea. I don't know if this thing tracks errors because I can't read Japanese, but this mechanic could do away with random mistakes on the field. That is, in theory. What I experienced was a weird world of jank. The computer often bounces on and off bases, resulting in some really dumb outs. Apparently all of the Professional Baseball Organization of Japan teams are represented here. Aces. I've only watched a few live games and highlights from that league. I know there are some minor differences in the way they play, so please pardon my ignorance. Do they not call outs if a pitcher catches a line drive directly from the bat? This kept happening here, and runners were always safe at first, so is this a thing? Also, why does the pitcher leave his mound after striking out a hitter? To celebrate? The animations look good, but the camera angles outside of the mound perspective are rotten. It's extremely tough to gauge distance when attempting to field the ball. Batting is okay, but there's too much emphasis placed on the height of the swing. You'll notice that the simpler games on this list appeal to me the most. Here in Baseball Real Awesome Superb, they're pretty forgiving with the area of contact, but it's still a bit too much to manage. Fielding feels bad, the music is fine, but the sound effects are shrill as all get out. Speaking of out, what's up with these calls? Outs. Obnoxious. PAX Softonica clearly had some ideas here, but instead of trying to reinvent the wheel with a more cinematic baseball experience, they should have focused their time on the basics. The camera is too zoomed in to make sensible plays on the fly, and the complex controls just get in the way. Super Real Baseball 88 is last due to how user-unfriendly it all is, but if I'm being truly honest, I'd rather play this than experience one more inning of Atlas's MLB, which was released the same year. In my heart, this will always be bottom-of-the-barrel baseball. It plays a bit better than the previous entry, but as I said, Super Real and I don't have a past. For it, I feel nothing. My disdain for Major League Baseball on the NES, it goes deep. Look at this package.
Look at my crotch!
That logo was everything to me one Friday night at the rental shop. This was to be my game of choice for an entire weekend, back when it mattered. These were huge decisions, especially if a friend was spending the night. Hosting official teams, stats, and rosters, this was going to be a big deal as a baseball-loving kid. The jersey colors and players weren't represented, but who cares when we have the numbers portraying their real-life abilities? Even their throwing arm is displayed. Managerial options are emphasized. Before each game, it's necessary to choose your batting order and pitcher. Regular match, All-Star, World Series, it's all here. Choose from National or American League teams on the blandest of all major blue menus. Don't get too excited because everything is presented in the same way. You wouldn't know you were so close to winning the pennant or performing in a matchup with some of the biggest baller names, or rather numbers of the era. When it comes to presentation, there's zero fanfare, but whatever. I'm a humble guy. At least I have all of this control over the statistics. Then we take to the field. Sloppy, slow, choppy, dreadful, diaper turds. It didn't take long for me, a child, to realize that all of the official imagery on the box and cartridge was to mask how inexcusably awful the gameplay was. This felt like a cynical cash grab to me then, as an idiot kid. Lazy, they couldn't be arsed to do anything right. The pitches are insanely unreadable. It's either the fastest of strikes or the slowest of throws. There's no nuance. The computer is needlessly, unrealistically aggressive, and the ball stops dead in its tracks when it hits the ground. What's more, it often changes speed in midair or gets hung up on stuff. Good luck chasing anything down in the gigantic, barren wasteland that is the outfield. It's all so unbalanced. After hit, the ball zips along, but the players saunter around like they're on a Sunday stroll. I know these are just computer characters drawn into a video game, but it feels like they're mocking me. Yeah, dude, no rush. We're only down by half a dozen runs in the first. Take your time, smell those roses. You've done enough work today. Why not have a picnic break? Fried chicken. It's infuriating. You'll notice I barely played outside of the first couple of innings in each of these modes, and that's because everything about this game gets under my skin. I was capturing footage at 5 a.m. before work, grumbling away, trying not to shout at the screen, really not wanting to wake anyone up as my blood boiled. These umpire priests wouldn't have been able to exorcise my expletive-soaked mumble rage that morn. Why is the right fielder so close to center? Is it actually possible to make a catch if it's right down the line? The computer has a propensity to hit it deep down this way, so why aren't the fielders closer to the edge? Base runners are so quick, nothing is balanced. If it's a fly ball to the outfield, it's almost guaranteed to be at least a double. Yes, I dig organizing my roster, but if you want to have a quick match, you're out of luck because this thing is so up its own ass with its Major League license that it forces you to manually choose everything before each game. You're either all in or you shouldn't bother because there's no quick play option. How about showing which button does what on the actual screen for those of us who rent? You know, the folks without the instruction manual. This will be a common theme with these baseball titles. Which button does what in these menus? Show it. Some sports music. Yeah, that's great, but how about the TV static sounds masquerading as crowd cheers? I'm so glad I can finally say it out loud. Fuck this game. Decades of anger relieved. A public platform to purge my disgust. Fuck you, MLB on the NES, you lazily crafted slop sack of shit. And while I'm at it, let me offer another fuck you to the MLB season package, MLB.com. I love the app, but here's a scummy story. You know when you sign up for a streaming service and it informs you clearly when it's going to automatically renew itself? Typically, they write pertinent information in the header of the email. No, not MLB.com. They buried the details that I'd be getting charged again this season 5 paragraphs deep in an inconspicuous newsletter. Seriously, somehow that's legal now. Greedy scumbags, as if they don't have enough money. Okay, so I got a refund lickety-split, but you better believe they're counting on a few people to not notice, or to apathetically just pay the fee because they can't be bothered to jump through the hoops to cancel. Now that I'm all worked up with old man rage, let's introduce the first of many bases loaded games that'll be appearing on this list. I think it's also important to note that from here on out, I consider all these to be pretty good. It's really quite remarkable how well they represented the sport on the NES. Bases Loaded 2, that's a Roman deuce with a fancy 80s horror style subtitle, making it Bases Loaded 2, second season. The worst in the Bases Loaded series in my opinion, but still so much better than Atlas's MLB. This is a competent Jalico joint created by a team of Tosei developers who clearly cared. It didn't take long for video game sports franchises to notice that they could release annual titles with updated rosters with little to no pushback from consumers, but this ain't that. Second season is as much its own thing as Halloween Roman 3Z's 3 Season of the Witch. Pitching and batting are much smoother than its predecessor. Unfortunately, when it comes to fielding, everything's still a jittery janky nightmare, and for whatever reason they insisted on displaying the diamond from different angles from game to game, making it a hassle to intuitively pass the ball around with the D-pad. It's doable, but distracting. Even if the buttons coincide with the bases between matchups similarly, my idiot brain still needs to work things out a millisecond longer longer, which often results in unnecessary confusion. Sometimes in this genre, home is up, but more often than not, it's down. Similar to Nintendo's baseball, it's necessary to press the direction of the base you are currently on to get your player to progress, instead of inputting the way you want to go. Does that make sense? It's clear that they wanted us to have a more realistic experience, but sometimes extra details interfere with the flow. This was a limited piece of hardware. I can appreciate how, conceptually, it's more sensible to be able to swing the bat at different heights or have more control over your pitches, but those are too many variables. It bogs down the action. Bogs. Also, please allow me to move around in the batter's box, even if it's a little shimmy wiggle.
Let's do the shimmy slide.
It's nice that jumping and diving are possible movements. Feels good. The ball moves well, and the size of the field is great. There's a balance between all these things that's almost there, but yeah, that weird camera angle makes it hard to adjust to the action. It has been decades. I've tried. Taking the reins as manager for a lengthy season was probably exciting for some back in the day, and it's pretty damn cool to be able to jot down a password to continue. These codes aren't particularly lengthy either, so I imagine that they'd be relatively easy to memorize. There are only 6 teams in each league, 12 in total. But whatever, without an actual MLB license, does it really matter who you're playing as? Still, it is cool how they cleverly named the players. Famous politicians on the Washington club, celebrities in LA. Neat stuff. There's an emphasis on biorhythms, giving this a very unique level of polish for those interested in simulated stats. Eastern or Western leagues, a sportscast, wild pitches, crisp speech, pinch hitters. The details are remarkable. There are several different character sprites, batting stances, and animations. It's tough to hit a sidearm pitch, which makes total sense, gives the game a realistic feel. There are neat little cutscenes when changes are made to the lineup. The computer often hits everything in these archaic 8-bit baseball titles, but here it's totally possible to strike them out if you vary your approach. There's a lot to appreciate here in second season. The computer tends to bait a round of tag in between bases, which is weird and not all that realistic. They're also pretty aggressive all around. You've really got to keep your eye on them, as they'll continue to play mind games to get ahead even when you think it's time to move on. It's pretty funny, but sometimes it devolves into complete bedlam. Sneaky little punks they are, and if you're up by a few runs in the 9th, expect them to break every rule in the book. They're tricksy bastards. At the end of the day, I respect a company that can release a sequel so different in such a short amount of time. They took a few swings and struck out in my opinion, but good on them for showing up to play. What happened? Tecmo was a beast on the NES. Ninja Gaiden, Rygar, hell, they even dropped a couple of brilliant NFL games. This 1989 North American exclusive, it's fine, sorta. I mean, it's baseball with that unique Tecmo charm, but without that silky smooth Tecmo action. A few gameplay options, as well as the choice to watch, only a handful of teams with names similar to those in the official league. There's a password feature for those who can endure the blandness. Go ahead! Goofy, low budget, phoned in big-nosed characters, bare bones imagery all around. Hitting the ball is a nightmare. It always looks like it's coming in over the plate too high. When contact is made, it's almost always a slow fly ball. Barely did I bop it out of the infield. Oh, but don't worry, because the computer can hit absolutely everything into all the gaps. This wouldn't be so bad if the base runners weren't so quick while the fielders drag ass. So slow, infuriatingly. Move! Dude, are you kidding me with this fight? The voices are clear. It's nice how the stats are displayed. Tecmo is number 1 when it comes to American football, but baseball only ranks 19th here. Amazing music. Seriously, this thing is a treat to listen to. kills me to place baseball this low. This black box Nintendo title is overflowing with charming simplicity. All of these early Big N sports efforts are so tidy. There's a confidence in their design that is undeniably appealing, but yeah, we weren't quite there with this sport in 1983 as an industry. As a kid who played a fair share of Atari 2600 sports games in the early to mid 80s, these primitive first-party NES offerings were remarkably impressive. Having the camera up this high is a great idea on paper, as it offers a better view of the field, but the details are lost in the distance. It's really tough to track what's going on as players overlap. They waddle around like crabs and everything is so slow, making it feel downright busted in motion. They seemingly scramble around like sea monkeys in sludge, but man, do I ever love the way they look, especially as they peer skyward to catch a fly ball. Am I watching a Looney Tunes? It's wonderful. Now, don't get me wrong, skillful participants can do well here, but oftentimes it's all a jumbled mess. Playing against a friend is definitely the way to go. I remember having some intense tournaments with others as a kid and again in college with roommates. I have extremely fond memories of getting high on shrooms, bong hits, and 40s of malt liquor with a group of dudes, chilling with this thing for hours as a young adult on no sleep, riding it out. The crisp, punchy sounds, you can practically hear the ump shout calls, or maybe that was the drugs. That of pop flies and how intuitive it all is. These are all beautifully basic things, appealing touches that only Nintendo could deliver. I really appreciate how the little dudes stick to their bases unless they're forced to run by the play. In a lot of these games, they automatically proceed and need to be called back, which is far less realistic to me. The scoreboard being in the background of the ballpark is an organic detail that I also dig a lot. I wish I could put this higher, but there are just so many great baseball games on the console. This early release is so special to me. I'm bummed, so let's move on. But first, a commercial break with an inhuman amount of gambling ads. It's sports, a family affair. Let's get those kids started right. This is it, the first of the Toze-developed Jaleco games, Bases Loaded. In my circle of friends, this was a real head-turner back in the late 80s. We'd have schoolyard arguments over the better NES baseball game, the Capulets and the Montagues. It would always boil down to this or RBI, well, except that one vote from Huey who championed Little League, but he didn't have a father and ate his own snot, so his opinions weren't counted. Oh, but little would he know, decades later on a bottom-tier YouTube list, he'd reign supreme. Comeuppance for Huey and his crispy crunchy boogers. Little League and Huey would go all the way that day. Having the camera behind the mound was so appealing to fans of the sport at the time because that's the way it looked on broadcast television in real life, you know, when you could actually watch a game on a terrestrial station with an aerial before the dark times when a shadowy corporate entity just automatically stole hard-earned money from accounts all over so every game can be watched on telephone computers. Greedy sounds. This was a terrific looking title back in the day, but all the flash glamour and relatively realistic flourishes resulted in lackluster gameplay. To put it lightly, the getting around is sluggish and imprecise. The mound mechanics are well and good with a ball that travels at a reasonable speed to track. If you're looking for something with the pace of the real sport, you're in for a treat. Constant camera changes, interruptions, and animations make this a slow experience all around. Change pitchers, call in a pinch hitter, bunts, passwords, but man, that pace. If you notice, all of this footage features the first few innings because I kept getting dominated. The computer always finds the gaps. Fielding gets me all riled up. The choppiness makes it so I always miss pop flies, and tagging an opponent is finicky with a bit of lag. You kinda have to make an infield catch, wait a second, and manually move the little fella over to the base runner. It's realistic, and I appreciate the agency over the players, but it doesn't make for a fun, fluid experience in my book. Fielders skate around, passes between bases often get intercepted, the stuttered movements feel bad, it just feels bad. Again, not being able to shimmy around in the batter's box, it's restrictive. The attention to detail puts this a tick above some of the other entries on the list. The catcher has a backwards lid, the charming cutscenes, vibrant visuals, being a batter, this dude blowing himself in a celebratory manner, the voices, the music, it sounds like baseball. Apparently you can even bait a hitter to charge the mound. I've never witnessed it, but I remember someone mentioning it back in the day. All of these things make Bases Loaded stand out, but yuck, dumb, boo, bum, I've never enjoyed playing the actual game. If my take on Tosei's first Jalico release didn't turn you off, this ought to send you running for the hills a lot. And I mean a lot of people have fond memories of Base Wars, or rather Cyber Stadium series Base Wars. Wow, they really put the cart before the horse with that title. Were they expecting to launch a whole series of goofy sports games like this? In 1991, Konami, under the guise of Ultra, dumped this thing in North America, and it's a half-baked mess with a shiny veneer. This was smattered all over Nintendo Power magazines back in the day, duping us dumb kids over here on this continent month after month. The Big K are my favorite third-party developer on the NES, but they had a knack for dropping ultra turds occasionally for American markets. Tom Servo, Dot Matrix, and a whole army of robots battle it out in this sci-fi take on baseball. The titular wars are quick and janky, but that's only the tip of the iceberg. Are you seeing these pitches? Yeah, I get it. They're mechanical super creatures, but just you try and hit any of this nonsense. The idea is solid, but the best novelty sports titles still make gameplay the priority. EA's Mutant League series was built off the engines of the company's successful football and hockey franchises. NBA Jam, NFL Blitz, arcade perfection that paired their respective sports down to the basics. Konami's own
Blade of Steel,
released 4 years before this sloppy mess and remains the best hockey game for an 8-bit kit. The difference is that they clearly put some effort into porting it from the coin-up original. It's obvious they had confidence releasing it in more than one region. This, not so much. Like Blades of Steel, the music is amazing. The ability to edit a custom team, select the amount of innings, and fool around with pitches, these are also pretty great features. Visually, Base Wars is a stunner, though it could have used a few more home run cinematics, since you'll be seeing this same cutscene a lot. Every second hit flies out of the stadium, out of the city, off the planet, into the stratosphere. The biggest problem is the camera. We've all played a side-scroller with a character who walks uncontrollably close to the edge of the screen, yeah? Well, the ball is always snug to the edge of the frame, making it a patience-testing kittyfuck to navigate any of the fielders to a defensive position. No indication on the diamond overview, it's all about memorizing where the blue or red droids are hovering around. It's awful. Consistently terrible, almost as though they were doing it on purpose. There's also a weird pull that occurs when you're trying to maneuver players in the infield, almost as if the computer is forcing the controls away from you. In one matchup, I witnessed a couple of glitches, and sometimes it's tough to know who you are meant to move. Base Wars could have been something special with a bit more testing and tightening. It ranks higher than a few others based on charm alone. There's a unique quality to this take on the sport that is probably best played ironically with a friend, but yeah, I can't recommend attempting to get into this in a competitive way. Sports are all about consistency and rules. This is a mess. Final two bases loaded games on the Nintendo are almost identical. I placed this third entry a smidge below the fourth, simply due to it being a little less enjoyable for me to play. Wow, what an obvious statement, huh? The perfect game is now the objective, which is weird. Tosei really went full hog with this concept. What are we doing? Signing off on a mortgage? Why bother with this nonsense with no word of acknowledgement of a pennant? This time, there's a stadium selection, intense music that can be toggled, less gameplay interruptions with cuts in the action only occurring in between innings and roster swaps. Moving the batter back and forth is finally possible, but for whatever reason, it doesn't feel like the bat is making contact with the ball when it's hit. Small potatoes, sure, but it certainly psyched me out a few times. Pitching is as much of a crapshoot as always. I found that it was significantly easier to strike the computer opponent out by mashing on the directional pad before release. This could have all been in my own head, but it definitely seems to make a difference. Base runners still suck to control. How hard is it to assign a direction and stick with with it. Everyone starts bolting as soon as the ball is hit, making it needlessly confusing to call players back. The amount of outs I was penalized with simply due to not being fast enough with my inputs was maddening. It's safe to say I can't stand the way the fielding feels in any of these bases loaded games. Clunky, imprecise, and inconsistent. The crowd behind the fence looks nice, and I'm so glad to have a locked-down stadium perspective. This camera change is what had me place this above the first two, but yeah, navigating the diamond is still a little too sloppy for my tastes. This had to be a stylized decision because this also carried over to Super Bases Loaded on the 16-bit kit. While we're here, we might as well finish this off with Bases Loaded 4, the best of the Jalico bunch. Similar to modern sports titles, it's basically a reskin of the previous year's installment. Playing through a season is an option, and this time the teams are written out in plain English on the selection screen. Previously, they were only identified by a letter. The biggest improvement are the Cheerios identifying the fielders. Too little too late, but hey, at least they got here eventually. Pitching and batting is faster than ever, now it's possible to move around freely in the box. Ultimately, this sequel didn't really need to exist. Yes, it's the high water mark, but Tose should have gotten here quicker. The NES was packed with superior baseball titles by this point in '91, and clearly I prefer those to this franchise, but hey, if this is what you had back in the day, a lot of time was probably invested in figuring out its idiosyncrasies. Like I said before, among my peers it often boiled down to Bases Loaded or RBI. I couldn't click with any of these games back then. Clearly, I never will. Jordan knows basketball, is acquainted with baseball, Gretzky knows hockey, Jordan knows Gretzky, both know cereal, cereal knows Saturday morning, Gretzky and Jordan know stars. They also know Bo, and Bo knows football, but, similar to Jordan, had an affair with baseball. Beam know Bo, Bo know Beam, they both know Data East, so now Bo and Beam know video games. Bo Jackson Baseball, or TV Sports Baseball as it was known on different devices in other countries. This is something. You'd be right if you confused this for a simulator, but no. Bo Baseball is basically every other baseball game but badder, but not in a bad way, in a bad bodacious way. This thing had promise, but be not so good, so it blunders, barely blunders. Bo knows, I know. You're either gonna dig this thing's unique pitching and batting mechanics, or you're not. I'm all for it, but in 1991, when this thing released exclusively in North America, I wasn't quite ready for it. Now that we've had annual roster updates of the show, a competent MLB licensed modern game with next to no competition in the West, I can appreciate these pseudo-simulation inputs. They're very similar. It's simple. Pick the pitch and take control of the ball. Hitting is the same, that is, if you're a Mensa-level brainiac wizard who can figure out the speed and trajectory of these throws. In my experience, swinging early is more effective. Once you've got that down, it's a lock. There's a lot of control over the throws, making it one of the more fluid baseball titles. Bo grow on me. Bo grow. Bo began to grow on me. There's something engaging about this thing. Everything is well considered. It's clear that these developers tried to put their own spin on the sport. That has to be like 30 baseball puns by now. Discovering that this also landed on the Amiga and PC isn't all that surprising. The color palette, music, and filthy-looking roided-up rage sprites are a dead giveaway that this was created somewhere other than Japan. Now, I know that Bo be chunky bold, the Bo and the not-so-beautiful, but this is still an oddly interesting oddity of a baseball game, ugly as it may be. Real teams, tons of options and settings, Canadian and American anthems sung by Fassbender and Drag. Once again, we can't move around in the batter's box, but when fielding is this good with tighter controls than most, it's easy to overlook my niggling nitpicks. This Australian developer even gave the fielder we control flashy contra pants. What's not to love? The ball is perfectly matched with the movement on defense. Old-timey milkmen umpire the bases, pinch hitters visit the bullpen, realistic Jumbotron animations, amazing control over stealing due to the players hanging tight when it's a pop fly. I've really turned around on this thing. This is an excellent little baseball game. Different music for offense and defense, bulky GI Bo drawings, full playoffs with skippable rounds, sensible, realistic errors, hitting batters with pitches, 2 bunt options. The computer feels so good to go up against. We were neck and neck for one match before they started aggressively stealing bases. It felt authentic. Badass. It feels good. I'm floored by the amount of fun I mined into this overlooked 1990s. The sport has never sounded so combative. Am I right to be scared of this ump? I thought sports talk was only a thing on the beefed up Sega 16-bit kit with its under-the-hood blast processing prowess.
Foul.
Curiosity got the best of me, so I decided to test out the DOS version. It's certainly something. Color me impressed.
I can do almost anything.
Unique camera angles, both leagues, fake teams with goofy names based off of real players, Oil Can, Dentines.
I'm a lumberjack and I'm okay.
Great stuff. Roger Clemens was everywhere in the early 90s. The Rocket. Let's ask him how many of his cards I owned back in the day. Of my many picture albums stuffed with Upper Deck and Tops, at least a few pages were filled with this dude's mug. Roger Clemens' MVP Baseball served the man's likeness well, as it was released for every console under the sun. The Sega Genesis, Game Boy, and SNES versions dropped a year after this 8-bit Nintendo original, and yes, I said SNES, not SNES. Don't be cute, say it properly, not Ninty, not NES. Surprisingly, this was developed by Sculptured Software, a below-average studio that was eventually swallowed up by the equally subpar Acclaim. Can you believe that name is making a comeback? Yikes! Speaking of comebacks, good luck matching the computer score in this one. Home runs are given away like peanuts here. It's almost a derby. Well, sorry, what was that, Rocket? Okay, great, thanks for the tip. Along with the option to ask Mr. Clemens for help, it's also possible to call on a pinch hitter, swap arms in the bullpen, and take down a password for season play. With tons of features and smooth controls all around, this is a bit of a sleeper hit. The cinematics are above average and snappy. Did you hear that voice? Crisp, clear, like a lo-fi junkyard dog barking out of a plastic Fisher-Price speaker. I've got to hand it to Sculptured Software on this one. MVP Baseball is an intuitive title with great flow. The animations are a little scraggly, and it can be tough to catch the ball along the fence, but it's better than you might think. Usually, ambitious camera angles like this immediately spell disaster, but they pulled it off. Plus, it's much better than the SNES port. A rank and review within a rank and review. It's unheard of. Incredible content. Today on Rank and Review, we'll be ranking and reviewing every Roger Clemens MVP baseball game released for a traditional console. This SNES port is the worst. At first glance, it looks like a carbon copy of the 8-bit original, and while that is visually quite true, this thing controls poorly. They inverted the base directions. Batters wind up in the box, slowing the pace a bit, but the biggest issue is the speed of the ball when hit. I can't react quick enough to any of this. Maybe I'd be more inclined to give this thing a fair shake if it weren't for the droning music. Is this the Kenny Loggins Caddyshack theme? Why is it so irritating to me in this game? Why does it sound like this? What is wrong with everything? Is this driving anyone else crazy? Good thing there are tons of options present on the main menu. The Mega Drive Genesis version is pretty close to the SNES one. This Flying Edge alternative has less flair as the game opens up, but more options. No errors? Holy cow, I'm giving this one the edge. Pun intended, because it seemingly runs a bit smoother and feels a little better all around. Still not as good as the 8-bit original, but the homers are back, and wow, are you hearing these amazing voice samples? It's like I'm really there. That is, if really there is deep inside a cavernous sewer with a television spouting static shouts and my mucus-clogged eardrums, perfection. Speaking of A-plussers, the Game Boy received a fairly late port that is about as authentic to the NES original as you can get. If anything, I'd recommend this one over the home console version for those long road trips. You know, if you're somehow still a kid in the early 90s, check out our bite-sized reviews of all three of these.
Cannonball coming. Cannonball coming.
Home Knight Runner Pennant League. What a name. This Data East Famicom exclusive is a quirky, intuitive little game of baseball, snappy movements, fun animations, and quite a few options, from what I can read, that is. Home Knight Runner Pennant League. Choose from around a dozen teams, then pick a stadium, each with a distinct look. What's cool here is that the distance is measured out for each. Oddly enough, I hit my first homer in the largest stadium. 3 music tracks, crisp sound effects, and smooth bass running. What we have here here is the beginning of the upper tier entries on this list. The only two minor gripes I have is that there's not a lot of variety or control over the pitches, and sometimes the ball moves a bit quick for the slow fielders. At the end of the day, this bare bones baseball title controls well and has charm for days. Unfortunately, Data East couldn't be bothered to translate it for Western audiences, but in this day of emulation and EverDrives, I'd urge everyone to give it a whirl. It's quite remarkable for a 1989 NES release, and you don't need to be able to read or understand Japanese. Get this, okay? Legends of the Diamond is a 1992 Tosei game, released a year after the final Bases Loaded entry. Wild how the same developer created this fast, fluid, intuitive title for distribution by Bandai after 4 middling Jalico joints. What we have here is an 8-bit celebration of legendary players, 30 of the biggest names in baseball, featuring a lowly half a dozen pitchers. Old school outfits, stances, and banners along the fence make it feel like the real deal. Choose between vintage and modern stadiums. What's with the lady? Couldn't they have done something else with the screen real estate? She looks fine and all, but what's the point? She doesn't even look all that different. It's possible to create your own team, which is great, but I always opt for the random computer-generated rosters. As I've mentioned in some of these other reviews, it's nice to have the option to fiddle with a lot of stats, but it should always be possible to get into a quick game. All of these animations look terrific. We've got the first broken bat of the list, and check out these great cinematics displayed on the scoreboard. Pitching feels a bit floaty at times, but hitting is solid. The wind plays a bigger factor than you'd think, but catching a fly ball is relatively easier than it is in some games. There are no markers on the overhead display for the fielders, but they're always located in the appropriate places. Intuitive and balanced, with a terrific sense of scale. It all boils down to how the fielding plays out, and here it's great. Running the bases is snappy, and the ball remains airborne long enough to sort the next play. The pace is pretty damn perfect. There's not a whole lot of glamorous glitz, but if you're hankering for some 8-bit baseball with a few pals around, fire this thing up. Middle of the pack, but only because the rest are that good. The first RBI baseball title to make the list. We're finally on the back nine. Wrong sport. This third entry in this extremely inspirational series is obviously great considering where it lands, but a few quirks keep it from being the best. They went above and beyond with the features here, a plethora of options, including a flash toggle. This may seem like a minor thing, but for a 1991 release, it's quite remarkable. The menus are also very easy to navigate with input instructions on all screens. Each North American city with a franchise is represented here with authentic players and stats for the year. What's more, it's possible to play as postseason teams from 83 to 89. A regular season has also been added in this second sequel. It's also the first to have a version over on Sega's 16-bit kit. That one pales in comparison. Some music at least. Refreshing, silent menus in both. So here's the thing. RBI was popular in Japan as the Pro Baseball Family Stadium series. It continued over there in the style of the first entry. Here in North America, Tengen released the original in a bit of a tricky way. Black Cart represent. These two sequels on the NES and the 16-bit Sega alternatives were given a more realistic look, and again, that's realistic with all the scare quotes. Some say these aren't as charming, and I agree, but it's all about the gameplay. The music, animations, and flair were all sacrificed, but overall, I prefer the flow of these sequels. It's all rather complicated. I'm sure it's documented thoroughly elsewhere. To cover all of them would be redundant, even if we have looked at a few Famicom exclusives already. Maybe we can take a look at this franchise in a separate video, zoop-a-dee-zoop. The problem with this third RBI game on the NES is that it just doesn't improve on much. Yes, its predecessors were great, but there's really no reason for the fielding to remain this slow. As the Bases Loaded series progressed, it was clear the developers tried to spruce things up, for the first few at least. In this Tengen franchise, they had a solid framework and only needed to tighten some clunky bits, but they didn't even bother. Maybe they thought it was perfect the way it was, who knows? To me, there's no reason to own this thing if you have the second. Visually, things have been updated, or rather changed. Look at these running animations.
Well, you might want to think about maybe moving your arms a little when you walk.
This is 1991. How about that retina-blasting field color? National anthems play for the United States as well as Canada, sans tariffs. Replays are still a feature, and the music is less annoying than most entries on this list. When bases start filling up and the pressure is on, some official ball diamond organ themes begin to play, which really adds to the authentic atmosphere. Frustratingly, the computer tends to pitch into the dirt, making at-bats needlessly tricky, but hey, don't you worry, because the opposition will definitely connect with every ball on offense and find every fucking gap, and that goes for every single RBI game. Moving around between bases feels sticky, like why is this such a common thing? Even the lousiest of platformers can typically manage a proper jump input, so what gives? Why do so many of these goddamned baseball games have leggy, gelatinous controls? It sounds like I'm down on this one, but only because I hoped for more. By 91, I had moved on to newer consoles and PC games, so I didn't play this when it first released. If I were stuck with the 8-bit Nintendo and picked this up based on the name alone, I'd have been disappointed since I already owned the first two. It's a solid top 10 entry that I considered placing higher, but they really should have put more effort into modernizing the gameplay. Now this is how you do a silly game of baseball. Dusty Diamond's All-Star Softball is yet another Tosei entry on this list, this time published by Broderbund, a company with a fairly mixed library of NES titles. Choose from fast or slow pitch, softball's the name of the game, so the entire gimmick revolves around regular Joes playing a pickup match. The cleverest bit is how teams are chosen. This is done like one would on the school grounds, with two captains going back and forth between choosing individuals. Witches, ogres, middle-aged dudes with male pattern baldness. Are these supposed to be children? This fella has a full beard, though when I played rugby as a junior, I got clotheslined by a 16-year-old who looked like this. Realism. Check out this poor kid with the Hannibal Lecter headgear. Rooms as bats, or how about this club? Or is this a mace? It's kind of violent, isn't it? There's a lot of character here. Speed differences, some bounce around like frogs in the outfield, smiley faces crossing the plate, frowny for outs. A few of these individuals are clumsy. The ball will sometimes take off into orbit after it hits the ground. It's also strangely charming. My only wish is that they leaned into the weird a lot more, or maybe they could have tried for the Peanuts license. The Snoopy game we got is a filthy shit stain. This would have been a perfect fit for Charlie Brown and the gang. Or, as I said, go even crazier with it, something completely off the rails. Dusty Diamond does some great stuff, but it feels rather safe. 5 distinct places to play: the Sand Lot, Park, Cliff, Island, and School. No, not that school, but now I know what I'll be playing after editing. These are all great, but again, I wish they had created more hazards. Imagine this puddle being in the outfield, or some patches of rough grass peppered all over. There's nothing wrong with what's here. Hell, it's a great idea. It just left me wanting more. Annoyingly, some of these areas aren't fenced off, so it's possible for the ball to roll out of bounds, resulting in quite a few in the park homers. Upon defeating the computer in all of these places, a 6th, more professional field opens up. Choose your misfits and team name, take them out to one of the diamonds, and enjoy the garish colors. None of this stuff looks very good, but it's goofy enough to be memorable. The amount of characters is impressive, even if most are ugly as sin. What are half of these supposed to be, anyway? All-Star Softball is impressive where it matters. It plays like a dream, unless you get stuck controlling one of the little punks who constantly fumbles the ball. Hey, I think I played with this kid in grade 4 hardball. The one that started it all. RBI Baseball was the tits back when it released in '87. When we'd rent games, these black Tengen carts really stood out. It wasn't commonly known that these were ostensibly illegal. We had no idea about Atari's involvement at all. They just looked cooler sitting on the shelf. Sleek. This seminal game acted as a template for every other baseball title on the console. The arcade-style action, cartoony sprites, and readable camera swap to a bird's eye view for fielding was mastered here. Players can't can't dive or jump, but the overall speed is slow enough to make this as intuitive as it is balanced. Swapping between right and left arm pitchers, calling in a designated hitter, silky, smooth base running, official rosters with some stats displayed. There are only a handful of fake teams, but what's here is impressive for 1987. Some fellas move quicker, others hit harder, sidearm pitchers are represented. The numbers on screen don't necessarily match these attributes, but you've got to start somewhere. A few Japanese league traits exist, such as mercy, meaning if one team is up by 10, the other forfeits. The infield fly rule is also not in effect, which makes sense as this was the mid to late 80s. Switch hitters, oversized shoehorn bats, iconic music. RBI baseball was so important that it continued to be many fans' go-to family stadium series for decades. It still receives attention to this day, with some considering it the best of its kind on the console. With all due respect, this is a fine game, but it's a bit basic. I think a lot of folks are more focused on nostalgia, or maybe they aren't into the sport itself very much. It could also be a case where people just read lists and say, oh, I know that one, and give it a thumbs up blindly. I'm not trying to take anything away from this game, it's a masterpiece. An important pioneer, but there are definitely better looking and playing titles on the NES. One of the most inspirational games of all time, but let's move on, as we could spend an entire day talking about this franchise. Perhaps another time. Placing so many series sequels in one clump is bound to get repetitive, so let's just cover the highlights here. This second SNK-developed Baseball Stars game adds a few things. Firstly, it's now possible to adjust the formation of fielders on the fly. The point system is more intuitive, allowing upgrades to be distributed by the player. Animations, music, typical alterations, but yeah, there's too much missing. Females are no longer included, and some of the freedom in editing rosters has been pared down. When you see the placement of the first game in this series, it might be confusing to see this sequel placed this much lower. Ultimately, you'd be fine owning either in your NES baseball collection, but the top 5 is so tight that I thought I'd save some spots to highlight a few other games. I'll say this, it still bothers me that infielders continue to cut off passes between basemen. A speedy defense can be the difference between a single or a double play. RBI Baseball 2. This sequel is the same as the third, only it came out first. Get it? Got it? If you have this, the other is pointless and vice versa. Sure, there are a few differences, but not enough to pick apart. This time, the anthems can't be skipped and the players don't run as goofily. Yeah, well, maybe I'm wrong on that. It looks just the same. The reason this is a couple spots above the third is due to those minor differences and the fact that the other is basically a carbon copy of this. Between the first RBI and this, they made a lot of changes. Less cartoony characters, better movement, jumping and sliding are always great. Did that dude just get beanbagged? Ouch. Ask Clemens. At the end of the day, an RBI baseball title had to be in the top 5. This one ekes out the first simply due to the fluidity of the fielders. After school from Monday to Thursday, I'd spend some time at a friend's house until my parents were done work. Most of the time, we'd hang outside as his folks had a lot of property, but on rainy days, we'd hook up the NES and play some safe, non-violent, good old Catholic games for the Lord, as his family were extremely religious. Like, fanatical, creepy religious.
We get washed with the blood that's red, and red's my favorite color.
He had 2 carts, as even Mario was too gory with the head-squashing caveman games because somehow violence against women was okay, again, Catholicism, and this one. God pledge, huh? How'd Nintendo let this past their Gestapo sentinels? Needless to say, we opted for this one more than the alternative. Back then, I always considered it a kiddie game, partly due to being forced to play it without any other options, and, well, just look at it. This isn't exactly hardcore realism now, is it? 6 innings, oversized sprites of children playing the sport. It's colorful, cartoony, and pleasant all around, but not exactly major league, if you catch my drift. Upon revisiting it all these decades later, I've got to admit, this is a fluid, fast, fluent game of baseball. It took 14 minutes to finish a matchup against the computer, and it was an intense, nail-biting affair. There's not a whole lot to say other than it masters that good old NES baseball RBI formula while adding its own charismatic flavor.
That's cool. Stupid, stupid, stupid.
Championships can take place all over the world, and while these menus can be confusing to navigate, I applaud the amount of options available. The music is fine, maybe a little grating after a few innings, but whatever. I threw a podcast on and was done with it. Have I suggested LeVar Burton reads enough? Well, unfortunately, he has concluded it, but there are plenty in the bank to get your audiobook on. Look at how pissed this picture gets. All of these visuals are meaty, detailed, jiggly. Power animations, power analysis screens. Now you're playing with power. What surprised me the most was to see that this thing was developed by SNK. Playing all these back-to-back over the course of the past year led me to research the teams behind them. Curiously, Little League felt a lot like Baseball Stars when I booted it up, and sure enough, it's the same engine, only here the base running is more like the second game, a bit sticky. Don't let the goofy graphics dissuade you. This is hands down one of the best baseball games on the console, making it one of the best baseball games ever. Simplicity, style, and punchy responsiveness. This god-loving game's got it all.
These things happen to them as examples to warn us against doing the same thing. 1 Corinthians 10:11.
To pay for those sins that I've committed.
Children.
One thing I've not mentioned is how nearly all these games have a spectator mode. Cool, done, but did anyone ever toss one of these carts in the old Nintendo just to watch the computer duke it out? I picture a sad, lonely, middle-aged divorcee in a stained white undershirt, half unconscious on cheap beers with an expired cigarette dangling from their mouth. Catch those ashes, Jimmy. This parent has had it. Of course they'd be sitting at the kitchen table with the console connected to the smallest lopsided television set available at Sears. Rabbit ears, splayed ashtray out of reach. This is the Tecmo Baseball title worth getting. Bad News Baseball is as snappy as it gets. Bunny umps, fielders who waddle around like penguins. Would you just look at this crowd? How about these gorgeous cutscenes? Oddly, this plays like Tecmo but doesn't look like Tecmo. Does that make any sense? This developer is one of my personal favorites on the 8-bit Nintendo kit, but they typically go for a more grounded, albeit stylized visual approach. Here, it's all silly, and I dig it. When an out is called, the player gets dizzy before dying forever. The colors of each team's uniform vaguely mirrors that of its real city. There are 2 leagues, Super and Ultra, with 6 ball clubs that represent official Major League franchises. Solo mode is a round-robin style tournament, resulting in wins and losses having less to do with progress. Basically, you can plug away as long as you want until you've beaten all the organizations. Females are playable with a code. Passwords enable the participant to pick up where they left off. I know I've missed talking about it in all of these mini reviews, but jotting down a code is standard for the majority of these baseball games. The stats are made up, but Bad News Baseball does that RBI style right with smooth gameplay and lively visuals. A must-have for fans of the sport. At this point, any of these baseball games in the top 10 could be number 1. When it comes to hitting, pitching, and fielding, they're all aces. This Culture Brain classic is the first of a franchise with around half a dozen titles, and for a 1989 release, well, it's got everything. Beanballs, errors, an assortment of modes, 6 stadiums including a couple silly ones such as Outer Space. Presentation-wise, everything's solid. Ultra Superhero Mega Perks. Typically, I play Simulator 1000 like any other traditional baseball game, but if you're feeling frisky, there are some built-in perks under the hood. Ultra Plays, Ultra Pitches, Ultra Fielding. Now, most of these are purchasable with currency accumulated while doing well in a match. Others operate like specials in a competitive fighter where a sequence of buttons need to be pressed to get a player to perform them. Some of these are fun, such as the Shadow Ball or weird theatrical mound actions, but even without these, Baseball 1000 would still be second. It's just a little icing on the cake. This is also a fully featured baseball experience all around. Simulator 1000 is right. I've yet to tinker with all the stuff under the hood here. Before we skim through this package, I'd just like to complain about the horribly unintuitive menus. Nothing is written out on these cluttered screens, making the simplest of selections an unnecessary hassle. Right on, that's it. My only bitchy nitpick, let's go. There are a lot of stats to pore over. When it comes to pitchers, it would have been nice to see something other than only their ERA, but whatever. A simulator in name, but we're still dealing with limited hardware. If you're the type of person who gets lost in numbers, this is the NES baseball game for you. A variety of fake teams, most belonging to real cities. Full seasons realistically extend to over 160 games. It all feels so punchy. When that ball hits the bat, you can almost feel it. Fielders move around flawlessly. This is somehow simultaneously the easiest of all these games to get into casually and the deepest mechanically. The computer is tough but fair, and that all boils down to how perfectly tight the controls are. Seriously, designing something so conceptually basic should be simple, but only half the titles on this console manage to do it flawlessly. As I'm writing this, I'm second guessing its placement because this could easily be number 1. I don't think this was a surprise to anyone who clicked on this video. This SNK arcade port is a bona fide classic. Baseball Stars is the go-to ball game on the Nintendo Entertainment System, and for good reason. But first, let me just admit to almost placing it a few spots lower. As I've said a few times by now, this video has been a work in progress for over a year. All but the bottom 2 have been placed almost everywhere. Now, I didn't grow up with this game on the NES. It wasn't until college that I bought a copy, but I only did that because a buddy and I were trying to collect every sports game from that era. I first played Baseball Stars at an arcade, and boy did I frequently pop quarters into it. SNK cabinets were my jam, but I rarely, if ever, enjoyed any of their home ports, so I probably just skipped this 8-bit release for that reason. That logo always felt like an NES home console gamble. Oh, but this one's good. Be sure to mention this one, ward off the inevitable actually loser loner limp dick fuckfaces out there. Crystalis is good. I guess that makes a few good SNK 8-bit Nintendo games good. Back to baseball. This is a masterpiece of programming. 1989. Can you believe that? Just looking at this thing, I would have guessed 91, but nah, 1989. Only a few years after the incredibly influential RBI. And what can I say? This is the perfect playing game off that chassis. I'm not going to repeat all the things I've been saying up to this point ad nauseum. It's good. All of it is good, and it's all in one package. It's the extras that put it ahead of the pack. Just wait 1 second though, I better do this correctly. Let's fall in line with the rest of unoriginal YouTube retro videos and have it spinning delicately. Delicate now. I love my video game. I love my video games like an adult. Be careful, this is gold. I don't have a proper setup, so a drum thrum will have to do. There. Sit back and collect those views. Let's get flowery. Baseball Stars is the first NES sports cart to contain a battery to back up progress, which is definitely necessary due to all the customizations. Save where you are throughout a season, but it's possible to create and name your own players as well as teams. This alone makes it superior to the arcade version, or rather, different might be the better term. The only thing that sucks is that those tiny batteries don't last forever. Imagine dumping months into building a custom team only for something to crap out. Yikes. But that's the pessimist in me. Earn money, switch and swap, play over 100 regular games, or jump into one of the many other modes. Take a ladies' league out to the park. I think you get the point. This is as fully featured as it gets. The action retains that simplistic arcade style, so don't expect the deepest of experiences here. It's just the best of what was capable during this era, but also one of the best baseball games of all time. My only minor complaint is that the music can get repetitive, but I could and have said that about many titles on this list. We all know how to mute or turn down the volume. It's not like these soundtracks are bad, they're often just limited. Baseball Stars is one of the greats, possibly a top 3 contender for best sport game of all time, right behind NHL 94 on the Genesis and the Game Boy version of Blades of Steel. And I'll probably have to put the FIFA series as a whole in there too. One thing's for certain, this thing has definitely risen up to become my favorite game of baseball, and that's saying something as I have zero nostalgia for it. Next time on this channel, something completely different, so stay tuned. Need sizzle. We need to get those kids addicted to gambling. No cigarettes, no cigarettes or booze, but gambling. More.